Here he is, TSN Hockey Insider, one half of the Ray and Dregs Hockey Podcast. He's back with us again this season as our NHL Insider on Mondays in his summery shirt. It's Mr. Darren Dreger. How are you?
I'm doing well. It's very summery here in Ontario, at least southern Ontario, where we're pushing the high of 24 degrees Celsius. Wow. I don't have the luxury. My golf game has been borderline lousy all year anyway. But as soon as training camps get underway, I stop kind of thinking about golf, which is either good or bad. In my case, it's bad. But you can still kind of, even though I'm not out on the golf course, I can look out my window. I can see how beautiful it is outside, the blue sky and all of that, and at least play the role like a wannabe, and that's what I'm doing here today.
You see, we finish up with Dregs every March, April, when the golf season is really taken off here, and they're still waiting. So, payback here. in late September.
Yeah.
Thanks, Dregs. You've done some digging on Canucks camp. What are you hearing?
Well, just positive stuff. And I that's not breaking news. And I think that most clubs would give you their spin on positivity. But, there's a lot of new around the Vancouver Canucks. There's some interesting storylines. What is Evander Kane, as an example, going to be to the Vancouver Canucks? Can he be as good as he was in Edmonton? And I think the short-term return is that's a yes. Yeah. I mean, he adds a uniqueness to the lineup, a physicality. He's got good secondary scoring and sometimes primary scoring, depending on how Adam Foote is going to employ him. But I think so far they've liked what they've seen there. The players that you needed to come back to training camp and into the preseason, ready for the regular season, faster, stronger, appear to be that. Talking about Elias Pettersson, Brock Besser is another. And now it's clear that we would identify those two players because they've got a magnifying glass on them, right? I mean, Canucks fans, they want to see it. They want to see it in the regular season. I mean, what do you learn when you're watching in a training camp drill or even in preseason hockey? But for the most part, I know the coaching staff and management like what they see in those two guys. So that matters. And then you also want to see the development of your younger players, the guys who maybe aren't NHL ready yet, but they're pushing. And I think that Vancouver loves the look of their defensive core, both what they have in-house ready, veteran experienced guys and all of that, but also players that maybe need a little bit more seasoning, but are real close at this stage.
And that's before they even trade for Luke Hughes.
Which we will get to, Dregs. Blake has a theory here. Just back on Kane. We were a little surprised it cost a draft pick and taking the full salary on Kane, but we were told that there were several interested parties. I think two other teams outside of the Canucks
Agreed.
Who were really hard in on Kane. Can you bring us back to that? Who was Vancouver vying against there, and how did it all shake out?
Yeah, to be honest, I'm not entirely sure who the specific two teams were. In dealing with Dan Milstein, who represents Evander Kane, he just acknowledged that there were actually a group of teams that had explored, a high level of interest. And, the idea of going back to Vancouver, essentially Evander's home, was one that, fit his eye, the player's eye, and he wanted that to work. He wanted to make that happen. And I want to revisit what I said. I can appreciate how a team might be somewhat reluctant to take on Evander Kane on a longer term. But how can there possibly be any risk? This guy can still play at a high level. He absolutely can. He's got an injury resume, but part of that is also based on how hard he plays. But when you look at the remainder of the contract here, come on. I mean, he is still a valuable player, and he's going to want to contribute. In front of his hometown fans, maybe stick it to the Oilers a little bit. Why wouldn't you? I mean, they need to create cap space, and he was part of the way that they did that. But I'm not surprised, and I wasn't surprised at the time. But to say that there were two or there are three teams specifically, that's more challenging. But I do know that Vancouver wasn't alone in the pursuit.
Philip Chytil's had a nice start to the preseason, but I don't think that should preclude the Vancouver Canucks from still shopping for that second line center. The problem is that there are others pursuing that profile of player, aren't there?
Yeah, you know what? Managers literally laugh at guys like me when we ask them about a second line center or a top four defenseman. And normally it's, a top four right shot defenseman. I mean, everybody in the league is looking for those players, right? So there's always an eye roll. But in Vancouver's case, legitimately, they are looking for a number two center. And now, Chytil, as we talked about before we went on off-season hiatus, was going to be the internal option that they hoped they would be able to lean on. And by all accounts, that's the way it's going to be. In a perfect world, sure, Patrick Allvin is able to snag that two-way center. However he does it, where is that guy coming from? Can't tell you, because, as Doug Armstrong from the St. Louis Blues joked about a while back, 27 teams in the league are looking for that number two center. But if you're able to find that legit number two, then Chytil, if he can stay healthy, turns into a 2B or a real solid number three center. So I think that's the direction that Allvin is continuing to push. But I'd say the same thing, Quinn Hughes and the Montreal Canadiens. I had the same conversation with Hughes last week about their second line and specifically a number two center. And he goes, man, I tried. And when I look at Vancouver and I look at Montreal, there are teams certainly in this country that don't have the trade assets that those two clubs have. Vancouver's got a deep up-and-coming blue line. Montreal has a deep up-and-coming young core, particularly on defense. So there are attractive commodities available in Montreal and Vancouver, but apparently not attractive enough. Or those guys are just shopping in too high a rent district, and the players that they're targeting just aren't available.
All caps but if they pull off a trade for a second line center this season, it's probably a guy that we haven't talked about yet. Is that right?
I would
It's going to be
so.
From a team that has fallen off, et cetera, et cetera?
I think so. That makes a lot of sense. And that's also part of an intriguing storyline for me as we, encroach the start of the regular season. Who is going to be that team or those teams like the Nashville Predators a year ago that were just no good? And is that team, maybe they're a team that didn't embrace the idea of a renovation or even a rebuild, leading up to the trade deadline or through the offseason because there was ownership pressure or whatever. No, we're a better team than that. We can insulate certain pieces. We can try and claw into that playoff equation. Well, all of a sudden you're 15 games into the regular season and things haven't gone your way even a little bit. And maybe the anxiety is amplified because you've got the Olympic break. That might condense the year and get some of these managers trading a little bit earlier than they normally would as well.
Mason McTavish is signed. Now, we saw this with Trevor Zegras, and he never quite got back in favor in Anaheim and was ultimately moved out. But as you understand it, is McTavish now off the block?
I would think so. They see, I like Pat Verbeek isn't paying lip service when he talks about how important Mason McTavish is as a corner piece of the Anaheim Ducks moving forward. I believe him when he says that. The player I think preferred a shorter term. Why wouldn't he? Because then you're getting into, again, a higher annual average salary value when you come out of that bridge. But I think that this is a real fair deal for both. It's too bad that it had to go the way that it did. But you can appreciate why McTavish dug in, supported by Pat Morris in Newport. I mean, talk about sharks, man. Pat Morris lives for this kind of stuff. So he ended up getting a sweet deal for his player and some term and security. But I also feel, fellas, that this was also a bit of message sending by Verbeek and the Ducks to Leo Carlson and their younger guys that they've got coming up in the very near future on contract. And now for me, that message is, hey, we're here to make deals. We're trying to build the Ducks into a contending team again. And that's hard to do when you're backed up by the restricted free agents on these short-term contracts, or then you go with the bridge and you get hit over the head with a deal that you have to pay because that player has evolved into that type of player. So I think it's a win-win. And the message definitely would have been delivered to those other young players that, look, we're here to make deals, but you've got to prove that the investment we just made in Mason McTavish, you're worthy of. So I like this deal from a Ducks perspective.
The getting back on Canucks and the Canucks camp, Darren, Brock Besser and Thatcher Demko are the two longest serving players in the organization. Demko under club control the longest, Besser on the NHL team the longest. You're hearing good things about maybe Brock having gained a step or two of speed, and Thatcher really asserting himself as a leader in that room. Pray tell.
Like a hungry attitude. You're right. A hungry attitude for Thatcher Demko. That's what I'm hearing there. And I'm curious how that manifests. I don't think that maybe leadership gets enough credit in Vancouver. And when you've got, a number one goaltender in Thatcher Demko, who's got a strong and positive attitude, that just bolsters that leadership group. And of course, he's got to stay healthy too, knock on wood, and he's got to apply all of that physically, into to giving the starts the Vancouver Canucks are going to need. But I think we can expect that. Brock Boeser is curious for sure. I think we were all surprised that, him circling back to the Canucks and getting the deal that he ended up getting. But he committed to his offseason regimen. And by all accounts, he does look a step faster. How's that going to look when the regular season starts? I don't know. But he's impressed the coaching staff to this point, as has Elias Pettersson. And I don't know if you guys caught Adam Foote on the Ray and Dregs podcast, but he took us through, and this was interesting, how he explained how players, focus on getting stronger and heavier and faster and all those great things in the offseason. But it doesn't always work. And especially when you're a lighter player, a thinner player, and you get heavy, can you carry that weight? And the explanation Foote provided with this guy doing close to 20 pull-ups and proving to everyone, hey, I can carry my weight. Again, it's got to translate in game action, but he's a bigger man. And so to be able to do that sort of a fitness testing, I think that just applies credence to the fact that he's invested. And if he could stay that way, we've seen enough evidence in his game that he can be a superstar in the NHL, but they need him to be that.
Biggest muscles for Quinn Hughes might be between his ears, and Canucks don't want to lose that, obviously. Jim Rutherford's comments in the spring have permeated throughout the course of the summer here, Drake. So here we are months later, and it is still the chief worry for this team, very clearly. And yet there's nothing they can do. They can't even sign the guy right now. They've got to wait another year.
No.
You've had a summer to sort of percolate and hear about how it is being disseminated throughout the league. Where are we right now with this Quinn Hughes situation as you see it?
Well, I can appreciate how it's going to be headline grabbing, and it's going to be a main focus around the Vancouver Canucks, not just in the market, but literally internationally. Why wouldn't it be? I mean, the captain, this guy is a superstar, and you're literally looking at a limited time frame here. But I think we're going to have to deal with craziness, moving forward. There's going to be those who say, he's already told them that he's not signing. He's just going to let this thing roll out. Well, that could be. But what we know is that Quinn, he's dedicated, he's committed to the Vancouver Canucks. He just is. And he doesn't know how to do anything other than play his very best when he dons the jersey and steps onto the ice. So, yeah, I mean, I think Canucks fans in general have to relax a little bit, at least for the first half of the season. But that it's going to be a major talking point in the second half, especially as you claw closer, to the trade deadline. But Vancouver is going to do anything with Quinn Hughes, provided that they're in it. And there's no reason to think that the Vancouver Canucks aren't going to be in it this season. Maybe we're having a different conversation as we drift into, the playoffs, or late in the playoffs, early June. I don't know.
Yeah.
But right now, I think it's much ado about nothing, to be honest.
So Tom Fitzgerald on July 1st says Luke Hughes is our off-season priority, and nearly 90 days later, Luke Hughes is still unsigned, Dregs. It has this guy over here saying, why not call Jersey and make a Godfather offer for Luke Hughes? What is the holdup on baby bro getting his extension in New Jersey?
Oh, nothing really, just term and money. That's all.
Just those two ingredients.
Yeah, just those two things. But, I checked in with Pat Brisson yesterday on this. He represents the Hughes brothers, as we know. And, it's very amicable. There's nothing nasty about it. But you're right. I mean, Fitzy did say that it was a priority to get this guy done. And we're on the cusp of the opening of regular season. And it's not done. And as of last night, it seems like there's not a whole lot going on in those negotiations. And Fitzy didn't even respond to me when I asked him about it. And Pat just simply said, nah, we're not really anywhere at this point. So that can change very quickly, right?
Why would Fitzgerald play hardball with the Hughes when he could have all the Hugheses if things go well here? That's what I don't get.
I get it.
But there are certain guys who put a stake in the ground with, right. But when it's the brother of the best defenseman or one of the two best defensemen of the world, and you have the third brother who's one of the top center, I would be doing everything in my power to facilitate a Hughes reunion. New Jersey.
I was provided with a conspiracy theory earlier today, not from anyone close, and let's be mindful of the relationship between the Hughes family and the Brisson family, right? And the fact that Tom Fitzgerald is a deal maker. He is, and he's trying to be fair to Luke, right? I'm sure he thought he was being fair to Jack. Maybe the family sees it differently. I don't know. I haven't talked to Jim or Ellen. But if you're being mindful of this and the idea, the dreamland of the three brothers playing together, well, you better make sure Luke is looked after right now, long term, right? And what does that look like? It obviously doesn't fit the model or the eye of the New Jersey Devils and Tom Fitzgerald, or that deal would have been done by now.
Are you saying that it might, in retrospect, have been too sweetheart a deal for Jack and thus better pay Luke? Is there any buyer's remorse on behalf of Jack signing that long-term deal for what could very well be
I don't know that for sure, but wouldn't every player that signed a contract a couple of years back, that you look at the salary cap, the cap that's climbing and it's climbing and it's climbing. I mean, as soon as you put ink to paper, you're losing future income. So, I could appreciate if I had that level of swagger, and this kid is going to be, again, we're talking about all three of them are superstars, and Luke just has to prove it a little bit more because he's the youngest. But I could appreciate why he would want to dig in, and that must be where they're at.
Dregs, truth is often stranger than fiction. So just humor me here.
Okay.
Elias Pettersson.
Yeah.
Connor Garland. Yeah. And a first-round pick or lekkerimaki, or both, for God's sakes.
He means the defenseman, not the center.
Who says no?
Well, just what does Fitzgerald even take the call? Because he knows what's up. He knows what's at risk for himself in terms of the Hugheses. Is there a price, or are we literally having a GM hang up the phone on another GM for a guy who right now is still a third pairing guy? I think he's
second.
You asked me to humor you, so I am going to, and I'm going to fuel it a little bit more.
I love you for it.
And I don't look at this is not insider information, so I don't want to get radio.
No, we're role playing here. Yes.
Yeah. What I'm saying is, if we're having this conversation here and now, you're a smart dude, Blake. I mean, you really are. But if you woke up this morning with that theory, do you not think that Jim Rutherford and Patrick Colvin probably have had the same thought at varying stages of this?
Of course.
And whether you'd get anybody ever to admit that there's been a conversation, I'd be surprised if there hasn't been. Both ways, right?
Yeah.
Why wouldn't there be? Yeah. Why wouldn't there be? Because inevitably, I think we all expect at some point that's what's going to happen one way or another. So I just don't know what that package would look like. It would be a beauty for sure.
Lastly, Dregs, you mentioned Adam Foote's appearance on your show, and I got to tell you, back in the spring, brother, he had been 2.5 years here as an assistant, had barely spoken, was very non-committal at that introductory press conference, although there were a couple answers that quite stood out. I was real worried. We were talking about a rookie NHL head coach who didn't want to have to do the communication and messaging thing and wasn't going to be very good at it. Through preseason and training camp, I am astounded at how this guy has addressed every matter with the team with honesty and forthrightness and clear messaging. I've been really, really impressed with his communication skills today.
Well, yeah, I've had the privilege and the pleasure of getting to know Adam personally over the years. He's from the Whitby area. He's super close with a guy who used to work with, Bob Torrens. So I've had so many deep hockey conversations historically with Footer. Not enough late. I mean, he's being very respectful and he's busy. He's trying to get his team together here. But he's been coaching for a long, long time. I remember just being in awe of some of the stories that he would tell of the days in Colorado when he and Patrick Juan, Joe Sakic would sit around and they'd just formulate all these plans. They'd dissect their power play. They'd make tweaks. They'd go to Bob Hartley. Hey, we got to try this. Those guys were coaching well before their time. That's just how his brain works. So, and he's got 2 young sons. So, I mean, I think, for those who don't know him well, he is an excellent communicator, but there's a different standard and different level when you're the head of an organization, head of a coaching staff. So I'm not surprised. I think he's going to be excellent. And he's got tough shoes to fill in Rick Tocchet, but he's going to bring a different spin to that bench, a different philosophy. But as far as being direct and holding people accountable, he will be every bit of that as Rick Tocchet was.
That's fantastic. As are you, sir. Look, not really insider season here, so we're going to catch up at some point in October, and then we'll get going for real once we got a chunk of the NHL season under our belts. Appreciate this, Darren. Welcome back. Thanks.
Thanks, fellas.